The Murderer's Script, When Words Become Weapons. Nero Wolfe Style Mystery. Chapter 1, A Script Arrives at the Brownstone. If there's one thing you can count on at Nero Wolfe's brownstone, it's routine. The orchids get their due. Fritz gets his kitchen. Wolfe gets his chair. And I get the privilege of being the only mobile object in a building dedicated to immobility. It was 10 minutes past 10 on a Tuesday morning, an hour Wolfe regards as sacred silence, when the doorbell rang. I was at my desk pretending to work, which mostly involved sorting mail into 3 piles, junk, threats, and things Wolfe would pretend not to care about until they became interesting. The bell rang again, long and insistent, like a man who didn't believe in subtlety or patience. Upstairs, I could practically hear Wolfe bristling. "Archie," he called, his voice rolling down the stairwell like a judicial sentence. "If that is not the end of the world, make it go away." I opened the door and found a man who looked as if he'd been written into the wrong story. Thin, nervous, early 30s, with ink stains on his fingers and a coat that had never known confidence. He clutched a manila envelope to his chest like it was a life preserver. "I need to see Nero Wolfe," he said. "Don't we all?" I told him. "State your business before my employer decides to declare war." He swallowed. It's about a script." That got my attention. Scripts usually meant money, egos, or lawsuits, none of which interested Wolfe unless they came with a puzzle attached. I stepped aside and let him in. He followed me into the office, eyes darting from the desk to the bookshelves to the famous yellow armchair, currently empty. The orchids hovered above us like green eavesdroppers, their scent thick and watchful. Wolfe descended the stairs with the gravity of a judge entering court, his bulk settling into the chair as if the chair had been designed specifically to surrender. He folded his hands over his stomach and regarded the visitor with polite displeasure. "You have interrupted my routine," Wolfe said. "Explain yourself efficiently." The man cleared his throat. "My name is Leonard Pike. I work as a copyist. Theater scripts. Business contracts. That sort of thing." Wolfe grunted. "A profession that requires accuracy and anonymity. Why are you here?" Pike set the envelope on Wolfe's desk with trembling fingers. "Because this script isn't fiction anymore." Wolfe didn't touch it. He looked at it the way a biologist looks at a venomous insect, curious, but unwilling to get stung without reason. "Archie," Wolfe said. "Open it." I did. Inside was a neatly typed document, bound with a brass fastener. The first page read like a stage play. Title, Final Act. Int. Office, Night. Dialogue followed. Directions. Timings. Movements. I flipped a few pages. Whoever wrote it had a flair for precision, down to where a man would stand, how long he would hesitate before speaking, even which hand he'd use to reach for a desk drawer. "This is detailed," I said. "Too detailed for amateur night." Pike nodded rapidly. "That's what I told him." "Him?" Wolfe said sharply. "The author. He hired me to type it. Paid in cash. Said it was for a private reading." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And you believed him?" "I believed I was typing fiction," Pike said. "Until this morning." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded newspaper. I unfolded it and felt the temperature in the room drop a degree. "Local executive found dead in office, police investigating." The victim's name was Arthur Kelton. A financial consultant with more enemies than friends, if memory served. The article described the scene briefly: late night, office locked, no sign of struggle. I looked back at the script and reread the final page. Kelton collapses beside the desk. Silence. End scene. "Well," I said, "that's unfortunate." Wolfe was staring at the script now, his gaze fixed, predatory. "How precise was the correspondence?" he asked Pike. Pike's voice dropped to a whisper. "Exact. The time. The location. Even the last line Kelton spoke, it was overheard by a night janitor. Wolfe closed his eyes for a moment, as if savoring a particularly complex flavor. "This," he said, "is not murder. It is authorship." I raised an eyebrow. "Meaning the killer had a pen instead of a knife?" "Meaning," Wolfe replied, "that the most dangerous criminal in New York may currently be congratulating himself on his literary talent." The phone rang. I picked it up and listened for half a second before handing it to Wolfe. "Inspector Kramer," I said. "He sounds cheerful. Which means he's furious." Wolfe listened, his expression neutral. When he hung up, he turned to Pike. "Mr. Pike," Wolfe said, "you will remain available. You will not leave the city. And you will not speak to anyone else about this script." Pike nodded, pale as a stage ghost. After he left, I leaned back in my chair. "So what's our angle?" Wolfe adjusted himself, reaching for his beer as Fritz appeared silently from the kitchen, offended by the disruption but loyal as ever. "The angle," Wolfe said, "is motive expressed as narrative. Someone believed reality would obey their words. And you disagree?" "I disagree with their arrogance," Wolfe said. "But I admire their confidence." I flipped through the script again, slower this time. Something bothered me, not what was written, but how it was written. The rhythm. The certainty. "Boss," I said, "this reads like rehearsal notes." Wolfe smiled faintly. "Precisely, Archie. Which suggests that the murderer did not act alone." Outside, a taxi horn blared. Somewhere in Manhattan, a man was dead exactly as planned. And someone else was already writing the next scene. Chapter 2, The Crime That Followed Directions. By 11:30, the brownstone was back to pretending it hadn't been rattled, Fritz clinking in the kitchen like a man trying to outdrown anxiety with copper pans, Theodore Horstman probably muttering upstairs among the orchids, and Wolfe sunk into his yellow chair as if gravity had been invented solely to please him. Me, I had a murder script in one hand and Inspector Kramer on the phone in the other, and the funny thing is, neither of them was willing to admit they needed my help. Kramer's voice came through the receiver like sandpaper on a sore tooth. "I suppose you and that fat genius are already congratulating yourselves." "That's a harsh image to start the day with," I said. "What can I do for you, Inspector? Besides improve your mood, which appears beyond salvation. You can stay out of my crime scene." "Oh," I said. "Then I can't do anything for you." He made a sound I'd heard often enough to know it meant he was looking for a law that allowed him to arrest sarcasm. "Kelton's office. Now. If Wolfe's got something he wants to say, he can say it to me, with witnesses." I glanced at Wolfe. He'd listened to the opening half of the call, then dismissed it with a flick of his eyelids, the way a king dismisses a messenger carrying bad wine. "Wolfe says hello," I told Kramer. "He also says he won't come." I figured. "Send your man a nice postcard," I suggested. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." I hung up and reached for my coat. Wolfe's eyes tracked me. "You will go," Wolfe said. "You're really building suspense, boss." "Observe," Wolfe replied. "Measure. Smell if you must. And do not allow Mr. Kramer to provoke you into imbecility." "That's my hobby," I said. "Where's the script?" "It remains here," Wolfe said calmly. "A primary document should not be paraded through Manhattan in your pocket, especially when it may tempt some ambitious fool to steal it." I opened my mouth, closed it again, and decided he was right, purely to annoy myself. Wolfe loved being right the way Fritz loved butter. "Fine," I said. "I'll just go look at the set where the play came true." Wolfe lifted a finger. "Archie." "Yes. The murderer is not the killer." He said it like a fact, like the price of beer or the direction of the Hudson. I paused long enough to show him I'd heard it, then I left before he added a footnote. Outside, mid-century New York was doing its daily performance, Taxis snapping at pedestrians, steam curling from grates like the city was exhaling secrets, men in fedoras pretending they weren't late, women in gloves pretending they weren't cold. I caught a cab and gave the driver the address. Kelton's office was on the 9th floor of a building that tried hard to look respectable, polished brass downstairs, marble that echoed your guilt, and an elevator that climbed like it was doing you a favor. The hallway on the 9th was crowded with the usual chorus, a couple of uniforms, a photographer with a flashbulb, and Kramer in the center, scowling as if the murder had been committed personally to inconvenience him. He saw me and pointed like I was a bad habit. "Goodwin." "Inspector," I said. "You're looking well. How's the blood pressure?" "Come here," he growled. "And keep your mouth shut. I'll do my best to disappoint you." He waved me into Kelton's office. The first thing that hit me was the smell, stale cigar smoke and the sharp tang of something chemical, like cleaning fluid trying to erase a sin. The second thing was the lighting. It wasn't just office lighting. It was theatrical, one desk lamp turned on, angled just so, leaving the corners of the room in shadow like they were holding their breath. Kelton lay beside his desk, half-turned, as if he'd tried to stand and been politely refused by death. His face was slack, eyes open, fixed on nothing. I didn't stare too long. Wolfe would have called it vulgar. I called it smart. Kramer jabbed a thumb toward the desk. "Look around. Don't touch." "I never touch," I said. "I only disturb." The desk was neat, too neat for a man who lived by paper and money. An open drawer revealed a locked metal cash box. A chair pulled slightly back. A wastebasket empty as a politician's promise. Then I noticed the file folder on the blotter. It was closed, but placed at a precise angle, like a prop. Next to it sat a fountain pen, cap aligned with the nib. Even the telephone cord had been looped into a tidy curve. Kramer watched me. "What do you see, wise guy?" "I see a man who didn't die messy," I said. "And I see someone who cared about geometry." Kelton was neat. "Not that neat," I said. Kramer grunted. "We found no sign of forced entry. Night watchman swears the corridor was quiet. Janitor on the floor says he heard voices for a minute, Kelton and someone else. Then silence." "Did the janitor hear what was said?" I asked. Kramer's face tightened, and I knew it before he answered. "He gave us a line," Kramer said. "A line he swears he heard clear. You can't just rewrite me." I felt a chill crawl up the back of my neck, not because it was spooky, New York was always spooky, but because it was too good. That line wasn't just a thing a man might say in fear. It was a thing a man might say in a script. I kept my face neutral, because Kramer would have enjoyed watching me flinch. "That's a line," I said. "Who was it said to?" Kramer's eyes narrowed. "That's what we're finding out." I stepped closer to Kelton's body, not to gawk but to check details. His tie was loosened. His collar slightly open. No visible wounds. His hands, clean. Too clean. No bruising, no struggle. Not even a torn cuff. I straightened and looked at the floor. There was a faint scuff mark near the rug edge, like a shoe had pivoted there, just once, controlled. "Any sign of poison?" I asked. Kramer's mouth twisted. "Medical examiner's on it." "Don't jump ahead." "I don't jump," I said. I glide. A uniform approached Kramer and murmured something. Kramer nodded sharply and turned to me. "We're taking that script of yours, Goodwin." "Wolfe doesn't share his toys," I said. "It's evidence." "Then come get it," I said. "Bring a warrant. Bring a marching band." Kramer stepped close enough that I could see the tiny red thread of anger in his eyes. "I don't care about your jokes. A man's dead." "Then maybe you should care about why," I said quietly. That stopped him. Not because he liked me, but because he knew Wolfe had a way of being right that made cops furious. I walked to the window. Outside, the city looked normal, people moving like ants, taxis crawling like beetles. The normality felt wrong in a room staged like a scene. "Tell me about Kelton," I said. Kramer exhaled like he'd rather swallow nails. "Money man. Private consultant. He handled accounts for people who didn't want accounts handled. He had clients in theater, finance, politics. He had enemies. He also had a taste for blackmail. There it was, motive with perfume on it. And the script writer might be one of those clients," I said. "Or a rival," Kramer said. "Or a nut. Or someone who didn't want to get their hands dirty," I added. Kramer's jaw tightened. "We've got names. Producer. Secretary. Business partner. Couple of theater types. We're rounding them up." "Let me guess," I said. "You'll question them for 10 hours and get nothing but denials and bad coffee." "I'll get something," he snapped. I looked at the desk lamp again. Its shade was tilted slightly, deliberately. Whoever had arranged the room wanted the light to fall on Kelton's face at a specific angle. That wasn't necessary for murder. That was necessary for drama. I backed away, thinking fast. "Inspector, did you check the switch?" "The wall switch." Kramer frowned, annoyed but curious. One of his men checked. "Switch is off. Lamp's on." "Meaning it was turned on at the lamp," I said. "Not when someone entered." "Someone wanted that lamp, specifically that lamp." Kramer stared at me. "So what?" "So the person who set this up cared about how the scene looked," I said. "Not just that Kelton died." For a moment, the room felt colder. "Not because of death. Because of intent." Kramer's voice dropped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this wasn't just a murder," I said. "It was a performance." His expression hardened again. "Then find me the director." I left him there with his anger and his uniforms and his dead man, and I went downstairs into the city's noise. As I stepped into a taxi, I realized something else. If the murder was staged like a scene, then witnesses were part of the script too. Somebody had made sure the janitor heard that line. Somebody wanted the line repeated. Back at the brownstone, the air smelled of orchids and safety, which is a fine illusion until you remember orchids are living things and living things can be poisoned. Wolfe was exactly where I'd left him, as if the universe had paused while I was out. "Well?" he asked. I removed my hat, sat at my desk, and said, "Boss. Kelton died in a room that looked like it had been directed." And the janitor heard one line. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "The line." I met his gaze. "You can't just rewrite me." Wolfe's lips parted slightly, not surprise, but satisfaction, like a man hearing a chord resolve. "Ah," he murmured. "Excellent. Excellent." I snapped. "A man's dead and you're humming." Wolfe's voice was calm as a cathedral. "Archie, the murderer has displayed vanity. Vanity is a flaw. We will exploit it." I leaned back, feeling the city's grime still on my coat. "And if the script has more scenes?" Wolfe lifted his beer, eyes thoughtful. "Then, Archie, we must stop the next performance before the curtain rises." Chapter 3, The Players in the Cast. If Nero Wolfe had ever gone into theater, he would have specialized in casting. Not directing, too much motion, but casting, where you sit still and decide who belongs where and why. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, he had assembled a company in the brownstone office that would have made a Broadway producer weep with envy or fear. Possibly both. I showed them in one by one, and each brought a different draft of discomfort with them. First came Miles Rook, a playwright whose name used to mean something 10 years ago and now mostly meant regrets. He wore a tweed jacket that had survived better decades and a look that suggested the world owed him applause with interest. Then Victor Hale, a financial producer who smiled the way men do when they're used to winning arguments by letting other people talk themselves into mistakes. Expensive suit, perfect tie, eyes always calculating the nearest exit. Next was Eleanor Vane, Arthur Kelton's secretary. Late 20s, posture like a dancer's, voice controlled. She'd trained in theater before discovering that steady pay beats standing ovations that never come. Last came Samuel Griggs, Kelton's business partner. Solid, heavy-set, with hands that looked like they belonged to a man who enjoyed closing doors firmly, on deals, conversations, and sometimes people. Wolfe regarded them all from his yellow chair as Fritz poured beer with ceremonial care. The orchids above seemed to lean in, curious. "Sit," Wolfe said, gesturing vaguely. They sat. Some carefully. Some like they were staking a claim. Wolfe waited until Fritz had withdrawn, then folded his hands. "You are here," he said, "because Arthur Kelton is dead." Nobody contradicted him. A good start. Each of you, Wolfe continued, had professional contact with Mr. Kelton. Each of you also had something to gain, or lose, by his silence. Rook laughed softly. "You make it sound theatrical." Wolfe's eyes flicked to him. "You are a playwright, Mr. Rook. Everything sounds theatrical to you." Rook's smile thinned. "I haven't seen Kelton in months." "Yet," Wolfe said, "you discussed revisions with him 3 days ago." Rook blinked. "Revisions?" I leaned against my desk. "Don't look at me like that. It's amazing what people remember when you ask them nicely over coffee." Rook cleared his throat. He wanted changes to a script. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "A script?" "Yes," Rook said quickly. "A hypothetical piece. A dramatization of business ethics." Victor Hale snorted. "That's rich." Wolfe turned his head slowly. "You disapprove?" Hale smiled without warmth. Kelton loved theatrics when it suited him. He liked to imagine himself as a kingmaker. "And you," Wolfe said, "funded several of his ventures." "Unfortunately," Hale replied. Eleanor Vane had been quiet, hands folded neatly in her lap. Wolfe looked at her. "You were present the night Mr. Kelton died?" Her eyes lifted, steady. "Yes. I left at 8. "Precisely 8? Wolfe asked. "Yes. I watched her closely. Too precise can be as bad as too vague." "And you trained as an actress," Wolfe said mildly. She stiffened. "Years ago. That has nothing to do with my secretarial duties." "On the contrary," Wolfe said. "It suggests discipline. Timing. Memorization." Griggs shifted in his chair. "This is ridiculous. Are we auditioning?" Wolfe's gaze pinned him. "You are all auditioning, Mr. Griggs. You simply do not know for which role." That landed. Silence thickened. I decided to stir it. "Let's talk about the script." Four pairs of eyes snapped toward me, each with a different shade of alarm. "What script?" Hale said smoothly. "The one that predicted Kelton's death down to the lighting," I said. "The one that read like rehearsal notes instead of fiction." Rook scoffed. "That's impossible." "Funny," I said. "That's what the janitor said before he repeated a line from it." Eleanor's breath caught, just a hitch, quick but real. Wolfe saw it too. He always did. Wolfe leaned back, fingertips touching. "I will ask a simple question," he said. "Who here has read the final draft?" Rook opened his mouth, then closed it. Hale tilted his head. There was no final draft. Griggs frowned. "I never saw any script." Eleanor said nothing. Wolfe nodded. "Excellent. Already we have contradictions." I stepped closer to Rook. "Miles, you said Kelton wanted revisions. What kind?" Rook hesitated. He wanted more tension. I grinned. Everyone does. Specifically, Rook said, he wanted the ending changed. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Changed how? He said the original ending lacked consequence, Rook said. He wanted finality. That word hung in the air like a dropped knife. Hale laughed shortly. Typical Kelton. He liked to control outcomes. And yet, Wolfe said, the outcome controlled him. The phone rang. I answered it and listened, my expression tightening. Yes, yes. I see. Thank you. I hung up. Medical examiner confirms poisoning. Slow acting. No struggle. Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. Then the murderer required proximity, patience, and trust. Griggs slammed a hand on the armrest. This is insane. You're implying one of us staged a murder like a play. I am stating, Wolfe said calmly, that someone among you believes life can be scripted. Eleanor spoke suddenly. Kelton liked to test people. Wolfe turned to her. Explain. He would give instructions, she said. Small ones. See if people followed them. He said it told him everything. That is interesting, Wolfe murmured. Did he test you? Yes, she said. Often. I watched her fingers tighten around her purse strap. Not fear, memory. Rook shook his head. This is all nonsense. Scripts don't kill people. No, Wolfe said. People kill people. Scripts merely persuade them. Hale stood. If this is all, I have business to attend to. Wolfe did not move. Sit down, Mr. Hale. Hale hesitated. Then sat. Wolfe continued, voice smooth. Someone here collaborated with Arthur Kelton on a document that blurred the boundary between fiction and instruction. Someone here understands dialogue not as art, but as leverage. I could feel it now, the tension, the unspoken calculations. Each of them was replaying conversations in their head, wondering which lines had been overheard, which pauses remembered. Wolfe gestured to me. Archie, please escort our guests out one by one. I wish to observe their departures. Gladly, I said. As they left, I watched Wolfe watch them. Rook paused at the door, adjusting his coat, an old habit. Hale left briskly, confidence intact but eyes darting. Griggs muttered under his breath, anger loud enough to be heard. Eleanor lingered half a second too long, as if waiting for a cue that never came. When they were gone, the office felt emptier, but not quieter. Well? I said. Wolfe took a sip of beer. They are all lying. That narrows it down to everyone. Indeed, Wolfe said. But not equally. I frowned. You noticed something. Yes, Wolfe said. They remember the dialogue differently. I straightened. What do you mean? Mr. Rook paraphrased. Mr. Griggs denied. Mr. Hale deflected. Miss Vane anticipated. Anticipated what? Wolfe smiled faintly. A correction that was never spoken. That sent a chill through me. You think the murderer rehearsed them, I said. I think, Wolfe replied, that someone has been directing this cast for a long time. Outside, dusk settled over New York, shadows stretching like stage curtains. Somewhere in the city, someone was holding the next pages. And we hadn't even reached intermission yet. Chapter 4, Rewrites and Red Herrings. If you ever want proof that Nero Wolfe believes the universe should move around him, try telling him there's new evidence located somewhere that requires stairs, taxis, or fresh air. Wolfe listened to my report from the office window like a Roman emperor hearing about barbarian movements, interested, yes, but not enough to leave the throne. It is intolerable, Wolfe said, that I must rely on your legs when my mind is perfectly capable. You want me to stop using them? I asked. I can sit very still and we'll see how the case progresses. He snorted and reached for his beer. Fritz had just cleared dinner, veal that had been treated with the kind of respect most men reserve for clergy, and the orchids upstairs were getting their scheduled attention. Wolfe was in his best analytical condition, fed, watered, and stationary. I spread the new material on my desk. Earlier drafts, I said. Typed by our friend Pike. 3 versions. The final one is the murder blueprint. The earlier 2, not quite. Wolfe leaned forward an inch. That's as close as he comes to lunging. Read, he ordered. I did. The first draft was loose. Dialogue vague. Timings approximate. The second draft tightened things, specific lines, clearer stage directions. The third draft, the fatal one, was surgical. Notice anything? I asked. Yes, Wolfe said immediately. The evolution of control. That's one way to put it, I said. Another is obsession. In the first draft, Kelton's fictional stand-in survived. In the second, he was threatened. In the third, Curtin. Wolfe steepled his fingers. The murderer refined not merely the text, but the psychology of compliance. Meaning? Meaning, Wolfe said, that whoever executed the murder was trained, gradually, to follow instructions without resistance. That sat badly with me. So this wasn't a one-night conversion. It was rehearsal. Precisely. The phone rang. Late calls never bring good news, they just bring news you'd rather hear in daylight. I answered. Goodwin, said Inspector Kramer, sounding like he'd been chewing nails. You still playing theater critic? Only because the play's killing people, I said. What's up? We just stopped a woman from walking into a lawyer's office with a poisoned thermos. I felt my spine straighten. You stopped her? Barely. She said she was supposed to. Didn't know why. Just knew the time. I glanced at Wolfe. He was already nodding, like a man who predicted rain by the smell of air. Where is she now? I asked. Holding. Shaken. And repeating lines like she's afraid she'll forget them. Wolfe gestured for the phone. I handed it over. Inspector, Wolfe said calmly, this was not an isolated improvisation. You have intercepted a rehearsal. Kramer growled. Then you'd better tell me who's writing the damn play. Not yet, Wolfe said. But you will soon prevent another death if you act judiciously. You always say that, Kramer snapped. And I am often correct, Wolfe replied, and hung up. I let out a breath. So we've got a near miss. Someone tried to perform another scene. Yes, Wolfe said. And failed. Which means the writer's going to panic, I said. Or rewrite. Wolfe smiled faintly. Exactly. I grabbed my coat. Time to go fishing. Where? Wolfe asked. Anywhere people rewrite their lives after dark, I said. Diners. Bars. Cheap offices with expensive regrets. Wolfe waved me off. Observe. Listen. Return. That's Wolfe's version of field support. The diner on 9th Avenue was a narrow box of light and steam, the kind where the coffee's strong and the questions are stronger if you ask them right. I slid into a booth across from Miles Rook, who looked like a man recently told his best years were behind him and had just decided to argue. You called me, he said. Why? Because you revise for a living, I said. And someone's been revising murder. He laughed without humor. I don't kill people, Archie. No, I said. You just rewrite endings. His eyes flicked to the counter, then back. Kelton wanted spectacle. He always did. Did he want to die? I asked. Rook stiffened. Don't be obscene. Then who wanted him dead badly enough to polish the timing? Rook hesitated. Kelton threatened people. He had files. What kind? Scripts, Rook said bitterly. Not for stage. For leverage. Conversations. Deals. Weaknesses. That was interesting. And you helped him write those? I helped him dramatize reality, Rook said. There's a difference. Not to the guy drinking poison, I said. He looked away. Red herring? Maybe. Or maybe just another ego bleeding quietly. Next stop was Victor Hale's office, glass, steel, and money pretending to be taste. Hale greeted me with a smile sharp enough to cut envelopes. You're persistent, he said. I'm paid to be, I said. Kelton had drafts of a script. You funded him. Coincidence? Hale poured himself a drink. Kelton had drafts of everything. He collected leverage like stamps. And you didn't mind? I minded when he aimed it at me, Hale said coolly. So you rewrote him. Hale laughed. If I wanted Kelton dead, he'd be found in a river. Not reciting dialogue. That was either arrogance or truth. Sometimes they looked the same. By the time I got back to the brownstone, it was close to midnight. The house smelled of orchids and quiet, a dangerous combination when you're thinking too hard. Wolfe listened to my report without interruption. None of them broke, I finished. But all of them knew Kelton wrote scripts for blackmail. Then Kelton was not merely a victim, Wolfe said. He was a collaborator in his own demise. Comforting thought, I said. What about the woman Kramer stopped? She is a pawn, Wolfe said. Like the murderer of Kelton. You're still saying the killer isn't the murderer. I am saying, Wolfe replied, that the true murderer never risked direct contact. I leaned back. Someone who writes, but doesn't act. Yes. And who panics when the script fails. Wolfe nodded. Which is why there will be a revision. The phone rang again, this time the brownstone line, sharp and urgent. I answered. Yes. A voice whispered, strained and hurried. You're reading the wrong draft. Who is this? I said. The line went dead. I stared at the receiver. Wolfe was watching me, eyes bright. A rewrite, he said softly. Outside, New York shifted uneasily in its sleep, like an audience sensing something had gone wrong but not yet knowing when to scream. Somewhere, the murderer was sharpening a pencil. And the next scene was already being blocked. Chapter 5, The Killer Who Followed Orders. If there's one thing New York does well after midnight, it's secrets. They sit in diners over bad pie, they pace sidewalks under broken street lamps, and sometimes they wait for you in a room that smells like fear and disinfectant. This one was waiting at police headquarters. Inspector Kramer met me at the door with the expression of a man who'd been forced to admit the universe was having more fun than he was. You're going to like this, he said, which meant I wouldn't. Try me, I said. He led me down a corridor and into an interview room where the walls had heard more lies than a confessional. Sitting at the table was a man in his 40s, neatly dressed, hands folded, posture straight as a stage mark. He looked calm in the way people do when they've already given up. This, Kramer said, is Harold Finch. Finch looked up at me. His eyes were clear. Too clear. You're Archie Goodwin, he said. I was told you'd come. That makes two of us, I said, pulling out a chair. Who told you? He hesitated. The instructions. Kramer shot me a look. I nodded slightly. Instructions. There it was again, like a cue whispered from the wings. Harold, I said gently, did you kill Arthur Kelton? Yes, he said. Kramer stiffened. Just like that? Yes. I leaned back. You want to add anything? Motive? Anger? Sudden urge to poison a man after a hard day at the office? No, Finch said. I followed the script. Kramer slammed a palm on the table. There is no script. Finch flinched, not at the volume, but at the words. There is, he said quietly. There always was. I studied him. No bravado. No defiance. Just resignation. Who wrote it? Finch shook his head. I can't say. You can, I said. You just won't. His jaw tightened. You don't understand. Try me, I said. He swallowed. If I deviate, someone else dies. Kramer's mouth opened, then closed. Blackmail, he muttered. Not exactly, Finch said. It's leverage. Psychological. That made my skin crawl. I'd heard that word before, from Wolfe, from the script drafts, from people who like to control outcomes. How did it start? I asked. Finch exhaled slowly. Small things. Phone calls. Emails. Instructions that didn't seem dangerous. Where to be. What to say. Who to call. Rehearsal, I murmured. He nodded. At first, I thought it was a game. A test. Then the requests became precise. And Kelton? I asked. He introduced me, Finch said. Said I'd be helping with a project. That following directions would protect people I cared about. Kramer leaned forward. Protect them from what? Finch's voice dropped. From exposure. From ruin. I glanced at Kramer. This wasn't about money. This was about secrets weaponized into choreography. When did you realize it would end in murder? I asked. Finch closed his eyes. When the final draft arrived. Draft, Kramer echoed. You're telling me there were versions? Yes, Finch said. Each one tighter. Less room to improvise. That word again. Improvise. Theater logic. Wolfe was going to enjoy this in the darkest possible way. Kramer rubbed his face. You're saying you poisoned Kelton because someone told you to? Yes. And you expect us to believe you're not the murderer? Kramer snapped. Finch looked at him steadily. I am the killer, he said. I am not the author. That landed hard. An hour later, I was back in the brownstone, shedding my coat like I was shaking off the city's grime. Wolfe sat exactly where he belonged, beer in hand, orchids perfuming the air with calm indifference. Well, he said. We've got our killer, I said. And he's not lying. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. I am pleased. Don't say that too loud, I said. Kramer's blood pressure is already auditioning for a tragedy. I gave Wolfe the full account, Finch, the drafts, the psychological leash. Wolfe listened without interrupting, eyes half-lidded, mind clearly racing ahead of my words. When I finished, he nodded. As anticipated. You anticipated a man confessing without flinching? I anticipated, Wolfe said, a man who obeyed because obedience had been rehearsed. I paced. Finch thinks if he talks, someone else dies. And he is likely correct, Wolfe said calmly. That stopped me. You think the author's still holding leverage? Yes, Wolfe said. And that leverage is the true weapon. I ran a hand through my hair. So what do we do? We deprive the author of control, Wolfe said. By identifying the mechanism. Meaning? Meaning, Wolfe said, that the script is not merely instructions. It is a psychological trap. I Saturday, break it down for me. Wolfe steepled his fingers. The author did not threaten indiscriminately. He selected individuals predisposed to compliance, those accustomed to taking direction. Like an assistant, I said. Or an actor. Or a subordinate partner, Wolfe added. Or a man accustomed to being tested. Kelton's tests, I said. He trained people to obey. Yes, Wolfe said. And someone learned from him. That sent a chill through me. You're saying Kelton taught his own murderer how to write the script? Not quite, Wolfe said. He taught someone else how to write scripts that kill. The phone rang. I answered, listened, and swore softly. Kramer? Wolfe asked. Hospital, I said. The woman with the thermos? She's missing. Wolfe's eyes snapped open. Then the author has revised again. I paced. They're escalating. Finch failed to finish the second act. Now they're improvising. No, Wolfe said. They are correcting. I stopped. Correcting what? The flaw introduced by interruption, Wolfe said. The author cannot tolerate deviation. So they'll tighten the leash, I said. Faster scenes. Less margin. Yes. I leaned against the desk. Then we're running out of time. Wolfe nodded once. Indeed. What about Finch? I asked. He's our link. He is also compromised, Wolfe said. But he has given us something invaluable. What's that? A distinction, Wolfe said. Between obedience and authorship. I frowned. You already said the killer isn't the murderer. And now, Wolfe said, we know why. I thought about Finch's calm, about the way he spoke of drafts and cues. He wasn't improvising. He was performing. Yes, Wolfe said. And performances require rehearsal. I straightened. Which means other people were tested. Wolfe smiled faintly. Now you are thinking. I grabbed my coat again. Then I'm going back out. I want lists. Kelton's contacts. Anyone he tested. Anyone who received instructions. Proceed, Wolfe said. But be cautious. When am I not? Tonight, Wolfe said, the author is likely desperate. Outside, the city was restless, taxis slicing through wet streets, neon reflecting like stage lights. Somewhere, a frightened woman was being repositioned, and somewhere else, a confident mind was rewriting fate with a pencil and a smile. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe lifted his beer and murmured to the orchids, the fifth act approaches. And for the first time, I wondered who'd survive the curtain call. Chapter 6, The Fatal Flaw in the Script. If there's a thing Nero Wolfe enjoys more than being right, it's watching someone else prove him right without knowing they're doing it. By noon the next day, the brownstone was set not for comfort, but for demonstration, a subtle distinction Wolfe appreciates the way Fritz appreciates the difference between butter and margarine. Wolfe had ordered the office cleared of clutter. The desk lamp was positioned with surgical care. Chairs were placed, not randomly, but intentionally. Even the phone cord had been coaxed into a neat curve. If you'd walked in cold, you'd have thought we were expecting a photographer. Or a confession. You're staging it, I said, leaning against my desk, watching Wolfe supervise the final inches of the lamp's angle. I am replicating, Wolfe corrected. Staging implies artifice. Replication implies truth. That's comforting, I said. Which truth are we replicating? The dead man's or the killer's? Wolfe settled into his chair, adjusted once, and reached for his beer. The author's. The phone rang, as if cued. I answered. Yes, Inspector, no, I'm not joking, because if you want the murderer, you'll bring them here. I hung up. Kramer's on his way. With our cast. Excellent, Wolfe said. We must not rush. You've never rushed a day in your life, I said. The universe rushes around you. An exaggeration, Wolfe said mildly. But acceptable. While we waited, I laid out what we had on the desk, copies of the script drafts, photographs from Kelton's office, typed transcripts of Finch's confession, and one small but nagging detail Wolfe had circled in red pencil. A line of dialogue. It was innocuous enough, short, sharp, the kind of thing a man might say under pressure. But Wolfe had stared at it longer than anything else. "Boss," I said, "you've been fondling that line like it owes you money." Wolfe didn't look up. "It does. Care to explain before Kramer blows his stack?" "In due course," Wolfe said. "Observe the language." I did. "It's English. Mostly." "The timing, Archie," Wolfe said. "The timing is impossible." That got my attention. "Impossible how?" Wolfe tapped the paper. The line was overheard by a janitor in the corridor. Yet the script specifies it as spoken after the door is closed and the lamp is switched on. I frowned. So, Wolfe said patiently, the janitor could not have heard it unless the door was open. "And the door was locked," I said slowly. "Indeed." I straightened. "Meaning the author didn't just predict the line, they assumed it would be heard." "Yes," Wolfe said. "An assumption based on knowledge, not chance." Footsteps echoed on the stairs. Voices. Kramer's unmistakable bark. I went to the door and ushered them in, Miles Rook, Victor Hale, Samuel Griggs, and Eleanor Vane. All looked tired. All looked wary. None looked innocent in the way that matters. Kramer took position near the door, arms crossed. "You've got 10 minutes, Wolfe." "I require fewer," Wolfe said. They sat. Again. Same chairs. Same positions. If anyone noticed the symmetry, they didn't comment. Eleanor's eyes flicked once to the desk lamp and away. Wolfe began without preamble. "Arthur Kelton was murdered by a man who followed instructions." Hale scoffed. "We've heard this." "You have not heard," Wolfe said, "what those instructions revealed." Rook shifted. Griggs clenched his jaw. Eleanor sat very still. "The script," Wolfe continued, "was revised repeatedly. Each revision increased specificity. This is not merely the refinement of art. It is the refinement of control." I stepped in. Someone was testing obedience. Seeing who followed directions cleanly. "And someone learned how to do it," Wolfe said. Kramer snorted. "Get to the point." Wolfe inclined his head. "The point is language." He held up the page. "This line, you can't just rewrite me." Rook nodded. "Yes. That's what the janitor heard." "And that," Wolfe said, "is the flaw." Silence. I felt it then, that tightening in the room when people realize they're on stage and forgot their lines. Wolfe went on. "The script places that line after the desk lamp is turned on and the door closed. Yet the janitor heard it from the corridor." Hale frowned. "So the door was open." "No," Wolfe said. "The door was locked." Griggs shifted. "You're splitting hairs." "I am severing them," Wolfe replied. I took over. The janitor didn't hear a prediction. He heard a line someone wanted him to hear. Eleanor's fingers twitched. Wolfe nodded. "Which means the author anticipated the witness. Anticipated the repetition. Anticipated the echo." Rook shook his head. "You can't prove." "Mr. Rook," Wolfe interrupted, "you paraphrased the line earlier. You said it roughly. That suggests distance." Rook flushed. "So?" "Mr. Griggs," Wolfe said, "you denied ever seeing the script. That suggests fear." Griggs scowled. Wolfe turned his gaze, slow and deliberate, to Victor Hale. "You deflected. That suggests calculation." Hale smiled thinly. "You're very good at suggesting." "And you," Wolfe said, turning finally to Eleanor Vane, "anticipated." Her head snapped up. "I did not." "You did," Wolfe said gently. "When Archie mentioned the line, you inhaled, as if preparing to correct it. My stomach dropped. I remembered it now, the hitch in her breath. "That's ridiculous," Eleanor said. I was shocked. "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "But earlier, when the line was quoted inaccurately by Mr. Rook, you almost corrected him." Eleanor stood. "This is absurd." Wolfe raised a hand. "Please. Sit." She hesitated. "Saturday." Wolfe gestured to the desk lamp. "Miss Vane, would you turn on the lamp?" She blinked. "Why?" "Indulge me." She reached out and turned it on. "Now," Wolfe said, "repeat the line." She frowned. "What line?" "The one the janitor heard." Eleanor swallowed. "You can't just rewrite me." Wolfe's eyes gleamed. "Precisely." Kramer frowned. "What did she do?" "She spoke it before I asked her to," Wolfe said. "With the correct emphasis. The correct pause." Eleanor's face went pale. "You're imagining things," Hale said sharply. "No," Wolfe said. "I am observing training." I stepped closer to Eleanor. "You were Kelton's secretary. You heard his tests. You saw his scripts." "I typed," she said. "That's all." "And you learned," Wolfe said, "how words control people." Kramer took a step forward. "Are you accusing her?" "I am," Wolfe said calmly, not concluding. Eleanor's voice trembled. "You can't prove I wrote anything." "No," Wolfe agreed. "But I can prove you rehearsed." She laughed, brittle. "This is insane." Wolfe leaned back, satisfied. "Insanity requires chaos. This requires discipline." The room buzzed, fear, anger, calculation colliding. Outside, a taxi horn blared like a missed cue. Kramer rubbed his chin. "What now, Wolfe?" "Now," Wolfe said, "we wait." "For what?" I asked. "For the author," Wolfe said, "to make one final correction." Eleanor looked from face to face, searching. "You think I'll panic?" "I think," Wolfe said, "you already have." She bolted. Kramer swore and lunged for the door, but Wolfe raised a finger. "Let her go." Kramer stared at him. "Are you out of your mind?" "No," Wolfe said. "I am certain." I grabbed my coat. "Boss." Wolfe met my eyes. "Archie, follow the instinct, not the script." I was halfway down the stairs before the words settled. Outside, New York waited, shadows pooling like ink. Somewhere, Eleanor Vane was improvising. And the final act was no longer written. Chapter 7, The Final Performance. If there's one thing I've learned working for Nero Wolfe, it's that he hates chasing people almost as much as he hates being interrupted before dinner. So when Eleanor Vane bolted from the brownstone like a chorus girl late for curtain call, Wolfe didn't move an inch. He didn't even sigh. He just watched the door close and said, calmly, "She will return." That was Wolfe. When the world ran, he waited. I, on the other hand, ran. New York after dusk is a study in shadows pretending to mind their own business. I caught a cab on 35th and Madison and gave the driver Eleanor's address from my notebook. The city slid by in neon streaks and wet pavement, and I kept thinking about Wolfe's words, follow the instinct, not the script. Eleanor's apartment building was modest, brick, dim lobby, a doorman who looked like he'd seen enough fear to recognize it. Eleanor wasn't there. But she had been. Left in a hurry, the doorman said. Didn't wait for the elevator. I tipped him and went back out into the street. A diner across the way glowed like a confession booth. Inside, the coffee was bad and the night was worse. I took a booth and waited, watching reflections in the window. She came in 10 minutes later, coat buttoned wrong, hair pinned hastily. She froze when she saw me. "Archie," she said. You shouldn't be here. Funny, I said. I was about to say the same thing. She slid into the booth across from me. Wolfe thinks he's clever. He is, I said. That's what makes him Wolfe. Her eyes darted. You don't understand what Kelton was. I understand he's dead, I said. And that someone learned a lot from him. She wrapped her hands around a coffee cup she hadn't ordered. Kelton trained people to obey. He called it efficiency. And you called it opportunity, I said. Her mouth tightened. I called it survival. Before I could push further, the diner door opened again. Victor Hale stepped in, immaculate as ever, eyes scanning until they landed on us. He smiled like a man who just found his seat. Well, he said, sliding into the booth beside Eleanor. The cast assembles. That was my cue to get out, or to stay very still. I stayed. You're both nervous, Hale said lightly. That's unprofessional. Eleanor shot him a look. You followed me. Of course, Hale said. Improvisation requires observation. That word again. I leaned back. Funny thing about improvisation, it usually reveals who knows the script. Hale's smile thinned. You detectives always think in acts. That's because someone keeps staging them, I said. The diner door opened once more. Samuel Griggs entered, shoulders squared, jaw set. He spotted us and shook his head. This is a mistake. No, Hale said. This is inevitable. I stood. That's my cue. Gentlemen. Miss Vane. Outside, the night air felt thick, like the city was holding its breath. I hailed a cab and headed back to the brownstone, mind racing. Wolfe was exactly where he belonged when I arrived, armchair, beer, orchids perfuming the air like civilized witnesses. They're circling each other, I said. Hale, Griggs, Eleanor. They know something's about to break. Wolfe nodded. Good. Good. I snapped. They're improvising. No, Wolfe said. They are rehearsing their alibis. The phone rang. Wolfe gestured for me to answer. It was Inspector Kramer. They're all heading back to your place, he said. Like you predicted. I'm on my way. Bring a notebook, I said. You're going to want to write this down. An hour later, the brownstone office was full again. Same chairs. Same positions. Same lamp, carefully angled. Wolfe surveyed them like a conductor facing an orchestra that hadn't practiced enough. You have returned, Wolfe said. As expected. Hale smiled. You summoned us. I summoned the truth, Wolfe said. You merely followed. Griggs folded his arms. This is harassment. On the contrary, Wolfe said. This is education. He gestured with a thick finger. Arthur Kelton believed that life could be directed like a play. He trained people, tested them, until obedience became reflex. Eleanor's eyes were fixed on the desk. Someone, Wolfe continued, observed this and learned. Learned how to write instructions that felt inevitable. Learned how to remove choice. Hale spoke smoothly. And you think one of us took that lesson too far? I think, Wolfe said, that more than one of you participated. That stirred them. Griggs shifted. Eleanor inhaled sharply. Hale's smile vanished. Kelton was not merely murdered, Wolfe said. He was outperformed. I watched them closely. Each reacted differently. Hale's eyes narrowed. Griggs clenched his fists. Eleanor looked tired. You speak of theater, Hale said. But where is your proof? Wolfe leaned back. Proof is a pedestrian concept. Understanding is superior. Kramer snorted. Try telling that to a jury. Wolfe inclined his head. In due time. He turned to Eleanor. "Miss Vane, you typed the scripts." "Yes," she said faintly. "And you learned their rhythm," Wolfe said. "You could recite them." She didn't answer. Wolfe turned to Hale. "You funded Kelton's projects. You understood leverage." Hale shrugged. "Business." "And you," Wolfe said to Griggs, "benefited from Kelton's silence." Griggs scowled. "Everyone did." Wolfe nodded. "Precisely. Which is why collaboration was inevitable." The room buzzed, accusation without conclusion. Wolfe wasn't pointing yet. He was tuning. "Someone here," Wolfe said, "believed that by writing the final script, they could control the ending. I felt it then, the tension snapping tight, like a wire before it breaks. But," Wolfe continued calmly, "they underestimated one thing." "And that is?" Kramer asked. "Human error," Wolfe said. "Even the best script contains a flaw." I leaned forward. "Boss." "Not yet, Archie," Wolfe said. Eleanor's voice cracked. "You can't prove who wrote it." "No," Wolfe agreed. "Not yet." Silence fell. Outside, a taxi horn blared. Somewhere upstairs, an orchid dropped a petal. Wolfe folded his hands. "We will adjourn. Tomorrow, we will conclude." Kramer stared at him. "You're letting them walk." "I am allowing them," Wolfe said, "to choose their final lines." As they filed out, I caught Eleanor's eye. She looked at me like someone who'd missed a cue and knew it. When the door closed, I let out a breath. "You're sure?" Wolfe lifted his beer. "Absolutely." "Which one?" Wolfe smiled, a small, satisfied thing. "Archie, the murderer believes the story ends when they decide." "And it doesn't?" "No," Wolfe said softly. "It ends when the truth is spoken." Outside, New York exhaled. Tomorrow would be opening night. And someone was about to forget their lines. Chapter 8, Curtain Call. The morning of the finale, Nero Wolfe behaved exactly as if nothing important was happening, which, in his vocabulary, is the highest compliment he can pay a crisis. At 9:15 he was in the Orchid Rooms with Theodore Horstman, at 11 he was in his chair with a beer he insisted was medicinal, and at 1 precisely Fritz served a luncheon that would have made a bishop weep. Meanwhile, somewhere in New York, a murderer was probably sweating through a shirt and rewriting a line they couldn't change. I spent the morning doing what I do best, being nervous on behalf of a man who claims nerves are a moral failure. I straightened papers, sharpened pencils, and checked the door like it might sprout a corpse. At 2:30 Wolfe finally looked at me and said, "Archie, stop hovering. You are not an aircraft." "I'm not hovering," I said. "I'm strategically vibrating." Wolfe grunted. "The distinction is worthless." The bell rang at exactly 3. Wolfe's eyes flicked toward the hall clock. "Prompt," he murmured. "A pleasing virtue in criminals. They are frequently impatient." I went to the door and ushered in our audience, Inspector Kramer and Sergeant Pulley Stebbins, followed by the cast, Victor Hale, Samuel Griggs, and Eleanor Vane. Miles Rook arrived last, looking as if he'd spent the night arguing with his conscience and lost. They sat where they'd sat before. Wolfe had arranged it that way, and when Wolfe arranges chairs it's never furniture, it's choreography. Wolfe settled deeper into his yellow armchair. Fritz entered silently with beer for Wolfe and coffee for everyone else, as if refreshments were required for justice to be civilized. The orchids perfumed the room with that rich, humid scent that always makes me think of expensive funerals and quiet threats. Kramer shifted his weight, glaring. "All right, Wolfe. You said today you'd conclude." "Conclude." Wolfe lifted his eyes to the group. "Very well. We will dispense with ceremony." That was a lie. Wolfe loves ceremony, he just hates standing up for it. Arthur Kelton, Wolfe began, was a man who trafficked in control. He wrote scripts, literal and figurative, using language as leverage. He tested people. Conditioned them. He believed that if he could predict a reaction, he could own it. Hale scoffed softly. Touching. Is this your eulogy? Wolfe's gaze pinned him. No, Mr. Hale. It is your indictment. Hale's smile froze. Wolfe continued, calm as a cathedral. Kelton's greatest mistake was believing he was the only author in the room. He trained others, particularly those who served him closely, to value precision and obedience. He taught them that a well-placed line could move a person more surely than a gun. My stomach tightened. Eleanor's hands were folded too neatly in her lap. Griggs was staring at the floor. Rook looked sick. Hale looked amused, still. Wolfe reached toward my desk with 2 fingers. Archie, the script. I handed him the pages, copies, not originals. Wolfe held them as if they were a legal document signed in blood. Harold Finch confessed, Wolfe said. He killed Kelton by poison, following instructions. Kramer barked, we know. Do you? Wolfe asked mildly. You know Finch killed. You do not know who murdered. Kramer's jaw flexed, but he stayed quiet. Wolfe lifted the page with the line circled in red. This is the flaw. The fatal flaw in the murderer's script. He looked at them all. The janitor heard Kelton say, you can't just rewrite me. He heard it from the corridor. Yet the script specifies it is spoken after the door is closed and the lamp is turned on. Rook frowned. So the door was open. No, Wolfe said. The door was locked. There was no forced entry. The janitor could not have heard that line unless it was spoken while the door was open, before it was locked. Then Finch said it earlier, Griggs muttered. Wolfe's eyes flicked to Griggs. Finch said nothing. Finch followed a script. And you know this because? Hale began. Because, Wolfe said, Finch was never intended to speak that line. Silence landed like a curtain falling. I leaned forward, because Wolfe was about to do what he does best, take a room of arrogant adults and make them feel like children caught stealing cookies. Wolfe continued, the purpose of that line was not communication between Kelton and Finch. It was communication to the witness. The janitor. The police. The world. Kramer stared. A planted line. Precisely, Wolfe said. The author ensured the line would be overheard, repeated, and printed. It was a signature. Rook swallowed. Signature. Wolfe nodded. A playwright's vanity. A director's arrogance. A belief that the world must recognize the hand behind the performance. Eleanor's throat bobbed. Hale's eyes narrowed. Wolfe's voice remained even. Now. Who here would craft such a signature? Rook spoke quickly. Not me. I write plays, not murders. Wolfe gave him a glance that said, yes, and your best ones have never killed anyone. You are correct, Mr. Rook. You are bitter, but you are not meticulous enough. You paraphrase. A murderer who scripts death does not paraphrase. Rook looked as if he'd been slapped with a compliment. Wolfe turned his gaze to Samuel Griggs. Mr. Griggs, your motive was financial. Kelton's death benefits you. But you lack the temperament for theatrical precision. You are a blunt instrument. Griggs flushed. To hell with you. Wolfe dismissed him with a slight tilt of his head. Then he turned to Victor Hale. Mr. Hale, Wolfe said, you are the correct combination, financial motive, appetite for control, and appreciation for performance. You financed Kelton. You feared him. You wanted him silenced. And you wished the event to send a message. Hale's smile returned, thin and sharp. You're spinning. Where is your proof? Wolfe's eyes gleamed. It is sitting beside you. Hale's face shifted, just a muscle, but enough. Eleanor's breath hitched. I saw it. Kramer saw it. Wolfe had been waiting for it. Wolfe spoke gently, almost kindly. Miss Vane. Eleanor lifted her eyes. Don't. You wrote the script, Wolfe said. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Hale laughed once, harsh. This is absurd. She's a secretary. A secretary, Wolfe said, who types. A secretary who learned Kelton's methods intimately. A secretary who understands timing, cues, and the power of phrasing. Eleanor's voice trembled. I typed what I was told. Indeed, Wolfe said. For years. You typed Kelton's leverage. His tests. His threats disguised as polite memos. You watched him reduce people to obedient performers. Eleanor's eyes glistened. He ruined people. Yes, Wolfe said. And eventually, he turned his methods upon you. She flinched. That was the first real movement she'd made all afternoon. I spoke softly, because sometimes my wisecracks aren't the right tool. He tested you too, Eleanor. Her voice broke. He said he'd destroy me. He had letters. Notes. He had recordings. He said I'd be nothing. Wolfe nodded once. So you decided he would be nothing. Hale snapped, you can't accuse her without evidence. Wolfe's eyes didn't leave Eleanor. I have evidence. The drafts. I slid the earlier drafts across the desk so Kramer could see. The first 2 drafts were looser, I said. The last draft, tight as a drum. Same typing style in all of them. Same punctuation habits. Same spacing quirks. Eleanor's eyes widened. No. Wolfe raised a finger. Most typists center titles differently. Most leave 2 spaces after a period. You do not. You use 1. Always. He tapped the page. So did the script. Hale's face went stiff. Wolfe continued, there is more. The line the janitor heard, the signature line, was added in the final draft. It serves no purpose for Finch. Its only purpose is for an audience. Eleanor whispered, I didn't mean. You meant to control the narrative, Wolfe said. To make Kelton's death look like his own arrogance turned upon him, like poetic justice. You wanted the world to hear that he could not be rewritten. Her eyes filled. He was going to ruin me. And Hale, I said, turning slightly, helped. Hale's head snapped toward me. Careful. Here's the funny part, I said. You weren't the author, Hale, you were the producer. You funded the cover, you supplied access, and you made sure Finch was positioned to obey. Kramer moved like a bear waking up. Is that true? Hale stood. This is ridiculous. Sit down, Kramer barked. Hale hesitated, just a fraction. That fraction was the whole show. Eleanor's voice came out small. He said if I didn't do it, he'd do it himself. And he'd make sure I went down with Kelton. Hale's mouth opened, but no words came. Wolfe's voice was calm, almost bored now that the puzzle had snapped into place. Miss Vane wrote the script. Mr. Hale sponsored it. Finch performed it. Kelton died as directed. Kramer stepped forward. Vane, you're under arrest. Eleanor didn't resist. She looked at Wolfe, tears slipping down her cheeks, and said, he taught me how. Kelton taught me how. Wolfe's eyes softened, not much, but enough that I noticed. Yes, he said. He did. That is the tragedy. Kramer motioned. Stebbins produced handcuffs. Hale's face turned gray as Kramer added, and you, Hale, conspiracy. We'll talk about your funding and your threats downtown. Hale tried to speak, but the words stuck. For a man who lived by language, it was fitting. When they were gone, the brownstone settled back into itself. Fritz appeared with a tray, as if closure required a fresh cup of coffee. The orchids, indifferent, continued smelling like money and secrets. I sank into my chair and let out a breath I'd been holding since chapter 1. Wolfe lifted his beer. Order is restored. Sure, I said. Except for the part where words can kill. Wolfe looked toward the stairs, toward his orchids, toward his controlled little kingdom. Words have always killed, Archie. Most people are simply too careless to wield them well. I rubbed my face. You know, for a guy who never leaves his chair, you sure see a lot. Wolfe sipped his beer. I have you. That's the nicest thing you've said all week, I told him. He made a dismissive sound. Do not become sentimental. Outside, New York kept moving, taxis, shadows, late calls, the whole endless play. But for the moment, our stage was quiet. And if there's anything I've learned in Wolfe's office, it's that quiet isn't peace. It's only the pause before the next script arrives.